There are three types of predator. The first worships only themselves. The second calculates every interaction like a chess move. The third feels nothing when they hurt you. Psychologists call them the Dark Triad: Narcissism, Machiavellianism, Psychopathy. Three distinct patterns of manipulation that have destroyed careers, drained bank accounts, shattered families, and left countless people questioning their own sanity. These are not mental illnesses to pity. These are strategic adaptations to exploit. The narcissist needs your admiration like oxygen. The Machiavellian views you as a game piece. The psychopath sees you as an object. Each operates differently. Each leaves different wounds. And most people never see them coming because they've been taught to look for monsters when they should be looking for masks. Machiavelli understood this 5 centuries ago. He wrote The Prince not as philosophy. He wrote it as a manual. He knew that power flows to those who understand human nature at its ugliest, who refuse to pretend that virtue and success walk hand in hand, who see the world as it is rather than as we wish it to be. This video will strip away the comfortable lies. It will show you the invisible mechanics of manipulation. It will teach you not just to spot the Dark Triad, but to move through a world where they operate with a level of strategic immunity most people will never achieve. By the end, you'll see 3 things others miss. You'll know the exact moment someone is targeting you. You'll understand why you were chosen, and you'll possess the specific countermoves that make you too expensive to manipulate. Because the Dark Triad doesn't prey on everyone. They prey on those who play by rules the predator has already discarded. Watch how they enter a room. Notice where their eyes go. Count how long before they redirect attention. The narcissist operates from a wound so deep, they've built an empire around it. Not an empire of land or money, but an empire of reflected glory, where every person becomes a mirror whose only function is to show them the image they desperately need to see. Machiavelli wrote that princes must appear virtuous while acting ruthlessly. The narcissist takes this further. They don't just appear virtuous, they believe their own performance. They've convinced themselves the mask is the face. This makes them dangerous in a specific way. They will destroy you to protect an illusion. They will sacrifice truth to maintain the narrative. And they will do it while believing they are the victim, the hero, the misunderstood genius whose greatness you failed to recognize. Because in their internal architecture, you exist only as a function of their story, never as a separate character with your own plot. Here's what most people miss. Narcissists don't love you. They love how you make them feel. The moment you stop providing that emotional supply, the admiration, the attention, the validation, the reflected glory, you cease to exist as anything other than a threat to their constructed self. This is why they can turn on you with shocking speed. This is why the person who claimed you were their soulmate can become your most vicious enemy overnight. You didn't change. The supply changed. And Machiavelli would recognize this immediately as the principle he described in chapter 17. Men sooner forget the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony. The narcissist's patrimony is their self-image. You are either enriching it or you're threatening it. There is no third option, no neutral zone, no Switzerland in the geography of their inner world. And the moment you understand this, their behavior becomes predictable, their tactics become transparent, their power over you dissolves like morning fog. They interrupt constantly but call it passion. They rewrite history but call it perspective. They punish boundaries but call it honesty. Look for the linguistic tells. They use I at rates that feel slightly wrong. They turn your achievements into their stories. They respond to your pain by describing their greater pain. They ask how you are, but their eyes glaze when you answer. These aren't personality quirks. These are diagnostic markers. The narcissist is playing a specific game. They must be the most impressive, most wronged, most special, most misunderstood person in every interaction. Machiavelli noted that wise princes never punish themselves. The narcissist never blames themselves. When something goes wrong, the architecture collapses outward. It's always your failure to understand, your inability to appreciate, your character flaw, your jealousy, your brokenness. Never the possibility that they miscalculated, overreached, or failed to deliver. because accepting that truth would shatter the entire constructed self. This is where they're most dangerous. They make you feel seen. They mirror your deepest desires. In the beginning, the narcissist is the best version of every person you've ever wanted. Attentive, fascinated, generous with praise, quick to connect, eager to escalate intimacy. This isn't love. This is reconnaissance. They're mapping your psychological terrain. They're identifying your needs, your wounds, your hopes, your insecurities. Why? Because the narcissist operates like a skilled angler. You don't catch fish by showing the fish what you want. You catch fish by showing the fish what the fish wants. The love bombing is the bait. The hook comes later. The hook is always the same. Once you're invested, once you've reorganized your life, your identity, your self-concept around their validation, they begin to withdraw it, not completely but intermittently, creating a pattern of reward and deprivation that keeps you striving, proving, chasing the feeling they gave you in the beginning. Machiavelli understood intermittent reinforcement before psychology had a name for it. He wrote that a prince should give rewards sparingly. The narcissist gives approval the same way, just enough to keep you hoping, never enough to satisfy, always with the implicit message that if you were just a little better, a little more understanding, a little more devoted, you'd finally receive the consistent love they showed you at first. But that version never existed. It was a strategic construction, and chasing it is like chasing smoke. You cannot fix them. You cannot love them whole. You cannot earn their genuine respect. These are comfortable lies that will cost you years. The only winning move with a narcissist is to stop playing their game entirely. This doesn't mean dramatic confrontation. Narcissists feed on drama. It makes them feel important. The strategic move is what Machiavelli called the art of appearing. You maintain surface civility while internally withdrawing all emotional investment. Gray rock is the technique. Become boring, unreactive, predictable. Offer no supply, no drama, no challenge. When they probe for emotional reaction, give factual responses. When they bait for conflict, respond with bland agreement or mild disinterest. When they attempt to hoover you back with charm or crisis, maintain polite distance. The narcissist seeks engagement. They're addicted to the high of affecting others. Deny them that drug, not with hostility. Hostility is engagement. Deny them with strategic blandness. Most importantly, document everything. Narcissists rewrite history constantly. They will gaslight you about conversations that happened yesterday. Keep records, save messages, trust your memory against their revision, because the narcissist's greatest weapon is making you doubt your own perception. And the moment you have concrete evidence that contradicts their narrative, their power begins to crumble. They're always 3 moves ahead. Every conversation has a purpose. Every favor comes with invisible strings. The Machiavellian is different from the narcissist in one crucial way. They don't need your admiration, they need your utility. Where the narcissist is driven by emotional hunger, the Machiavellian is driven by strategic calculation. They view social interaction as chess. They study power dynamics with the intensity of a doctoral student. They collect information not for gossip but for leverage. And they possess the patience to wait months or years for the right moment to use what they've learned. Machiavelli himself would recognize these practitioners immediately. They've read the manual, they've internalized the lessons. They know that appearing harmless makes you powerful, that friendship can be weaponized, that the person who controls information controls outcomes. And they've structured their entire interpersonal approach around accumulating advantages while maintaining plausible deniability. Watch how they build relationships. Notice the pattern of favors. Track who owes what. The Machiavellian operates through networks. They don't dominate through force. They orchestrate through obligation. They'll help you with something specific. They'll connect you with someone valuable. They'll offer advice at a crucial moment, and they'll never explicitly state what they expect in return. This is deliberate. Implicit debts are more powerful than explicit ones. If the debt is stated, it can be paid and cleared. If the debt remains unspoken, it accumulates with interest, becoming a moral weight that can be called in at any time. Machiavelli wrote, "One who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived." The Machiavellian doesn't deceive through lies. They deceive through strategic generosity. They make you want to help them, feel obligated to support them, believe you're in a genuine partnership while they're simply adding another asset to their portfolio. And the moment you become more costly than useful, you'll discover that the friendship had terms and conditions you never saw. They ask more than they share. They remember everything you forget. They know your pressure points. This is the Machiavellian's primary weapon, information. While you're being authentic, vulnerable, real, they're cataloging. They know your insecurities because you mentioned them once 8 months ago. They know your financial situation because they asked friendly questions. They know your relationship problems because you vented over coffee. They've been filling a database, and they'll use it not through obvious manipulation, but through subtle steering. A comment here that triggers your insecurity. A suggestion there that exploits your blind spot. A connection introduced at exactly the moment you're desperate. The Machiavellian doesn't push you toward their desired outcome. They engineer situations where their desired outcome appears to be your idea, your choice, your initiative. This is Machiavelli's ultimate principle. Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception. They're always networking, never just talking. They deflect personal questions while probing yours. They create strategic ambiguity around their intentions. Look for conversational asymmetry. The Machiavellian asks 3 questions for everyone they answer. They're friendly but never truly vulnerable. They know details about your life you don't remember sharing. They speak in layers. Surface meaning for most people, deeper meaning for those paying attention. They form alliances with contradictory people, maintaining multiple relationships that seem incompatible until you realize they're collecting options, not building friendships. Watch how they handle conflict. They rarely confront directly. They maneuver others into confronting. When there's a problem between them and someone else, suddenly you're having conversations with third parties. Perspective is being shaped, context is being framed, and by the time anything surfaces, they're already positioned as the reasonable party while their opponent has been isolated, all without them appearing to do anything aggressive. They tell you about person B. They tell person B about you. They control the narrative between you. Triangulation is the Machiavellian's favorite tool. Instead of dealing with people directly, they create communication channels that run through themselves. This serves multiple functions. First, it makes them indispensable. You need them to understand what person B really thinks. Second, it allows them to shape perception on both sides. Third, it prevents direct alliances that might exclude them. The Machiavellian is always the hub, never the spoke. Machiavelli wrote that a prince should never allow powerful subjects to become too close. The modern Machiavellian applies this to their entire network. They maintain connection without allowing others to connect around them. If you notice someone consistently positioning themselves as the intermediary, the translator, the person who understands both sides, you're watching triangulation in action. And the moment you bypass them to speak directly with the other party, you'll see their discomfort, their quick attempt to reinsert themselves, their sudden need to clarify or add context. They can't manipulate what they can't hide. They can't leverage what everyone knows. They can't triangulate when people talk directly. The Machiavellian's power comes from information asymmetry and communication control. The strategic counter is to eliminate both. When they ask probing questions, provide surface-level information freely while avoiding deep vulnerability. When they attempt triangulation, communicate directly with all parties. When they try to accumulate favors, keep the ledger explicit. I appreciate the help. Let me know if you ever need something specific in return. This does 2 things simultaneously. It removes their primary weapons. It forces them to reveal their intentions earlier. The Machiavellian operates in shadows and implications. Strategic transparency functions like floodlights. It doesn't destroy them. They're too adaptable for that, but it dramatically increases the cost of manipulating you specifically. And here's the crucial insight Machiavelli himself understood. The predator always chooses the easiest prey. Make yourself expensive to manipulate. Maintain clear boundaries around information. Document agreements and conversations. The Machiavellian will simply move to softer targets. Not because you defeated them, but because you stopped being worth the energy which is the only victory that matters. They smile at appropriate moments. They use emotional words correctly, but something is missing underneath. The psychopath is the most dangerous of the triad because they lack the very thing that makes the others predictable. They feel no genuine emotion toward you whatsoever. The narcissist feels desperate need. The Machiavellian feels calculated interest. The psychopath feels nothing. You are not a person to them. You are an object that makes sounds, an obstacle or an opportunity, a resource to extract or a barrier to remove. Machiavelli wrote, "Where the willingness is great, the difficulties cannot be great." The psychopath has willingness without conscience. They will do anything that advances their goal. There is no internal brake system, no moment of hesitation, no voice that says, "This is too far." And this makes them capable of actions that normal people can't even imagine. Not because they're evil in a dramatic sense, but because they're operating without the emotional governor that prevents most humans from causing extreme harm. They're often magnetic initially. They tell exactly the story you want to hear. They seem fearless, exciting, larger than life. The psychopath's charm is different from the narcissist's love bombing. The narcissist needs you to feed their ego. The psychopath is simply using charm as a tool, the way a carpenter uses a hammer. There's no emotional investment in the process. They've learned through trial and error that certain behaviors produce certain responses. Smiling makes people trust. Vulnerability makes people bond. Excitement makes people overlook details. So they perform these behaviors with mechanical precision. Watch for the uncanny valley effect. The emotional expression is right but slightly off. The timing is good but feels rehearsed. They respond to your grief with textbook empathy that somehow doesn't land as genuine. They celebrate your success with enthusiasm that seems painted on. Their anger appears and disappears too quickly, like flipping a light switch. This is because they're not feeling and then expressing. They're identifying the appropriate response and executing it. They rarely maintain long-term anything. Jobs, relationships, residences, all temporary. They extract and move on. The psychopath is fundamentally parasitic. They attach to hosts, drain resources, then detach and find new hosts. This isn't strategic in the Machiavellian sense. It's simply how they operate. They don't build, they exploit existing structures. They don't invest in long-term relationships. They mine them for immediate benefit. They don't feel gratitude, loyalty, or obligation, so there's nothing anchoring them to any particular person or place once the resources are depleted. Machiavelli warned princes about mercenaries. He said they're faithful only while the pay continues. The psychopath is a mercenary in every relationship. The moment you stop being useful, interesting, or accessible, you cease to exist in their consideration. Not through malice, but through absence of attachment, which is somehow more chilling than hatred, because at least hatred implies you mattered enough to inspire emotion. Their stories don't quite add up. Their past is vague or constantly changing. People from their history are all villains. The psychopath leaves a trail of destruction, but they'll describe it as a trail of betrayal by others. Every previous partner was crazy. Every previous employer was unreasonable. Every former friend stabbed them in the back. Listen for the pattern. If someone describes a history where they're perpetually the victim of others' malice, you're either meeting the unluckiest person alive, or you're meeting someone who lacks the capacity to recognize their own destructive impact. Look for the risk-seeking behavior. They're often involved in near disasters. They tell stories of narrow escapes with pride. Normal people try to avoid risk. The psychopath is chronically bored, constantly seeking stimulation, perpetually pushing boundaries. They drive too fast. They make impulsive financial decisions. They engage in behaviors that would terrify most people. Why? Because their nervous system requires higher levels of arousal to register anything, and consequences feel abstract, theoretical, always applicable to other people, but somehow never to them. When caught, they don't apologize. They explain why they're the victim. They reframe their harm as your misunderstanding. This is the psychopath's defensive move. When their behavior is exposed, they don't express genuine remorse. They can't, because they don't feel it. Instead, they perform remorse while simultaneously reframing the narrative. They had no choice. You don't understand the pressure they were under. They're the one who's really suffering here. And if performance doesn't work, they pivot instantly to anger, to threats, to whatever tool might work, trying approaches like a burglar trying keys until one opens the lock. Machiavelli wrote about appearing merciful while being ruthless. The psychopath appears vulnerable while calculating their next move. They weaponize the very empathy they lack. They've learned that humans respond to displays of suffering, so they manufacture suffering displays when cornered. And the moment you respond with compassion, they interpret it as weakness and resume exploitation at a more careful, more hidden level. They leave financial destruction. They leave emotional wreckage. They leave people questioning reality itself. The aftermath of a psychopathic relationship is distinctive. Victims often report feeling like they're losing their mind. Why? Because the psychopath has been systematically lying about easily verifiable facts, denying things that definitely happened, claiming things that never occurred. This isn't strategic gaslighting like the narcissist employs. This is casual reality distortion. The psychopath lies even when truth would serve them better, because lying is simply their default mode, their native language, the way they interact with a world they fundamentally don't understand emotionally. Financial devastation is common. They borrow and never repay. They steal and justify it. They destroy your credit, drain your accounts, leave you with their debts, not through elaborate schemes necessarily, but through constant small extractions that compound. $20 here, a credit card charge there, a bill in your name, a loan you co-signed, death by 1,000 cuts, each one individually deniable, collectively devastating. There is no partial solution with a psychopath. There is no managed relationship. There is only distance or destruction. Every other approach fails because it assumes the psychopath has the capacity for change, growth, or genuine connection. They don't. This isn't pessimism. This is recognition of fundamental architecture. You cannot teach empathy to someone whose brain doesn't process it. You cannot appeal to conscience that doesn't exist. You cannot negotiate with someone who views negotiation as just another manipulation technique. The only effective response is complete removal. No contact, not limited contact. No explanations, no closure conversations, no attempts to make them understand. Machiavelli wrote that some enemies cannot be reconciled, only eliminated from your sphere. The psychopath is that enemy, and elimination means block all communication channels, involve legal structures if they violate boundaries, warn others if ethically necessary, document everything in case you need protection, but never engage directly, never respond to provocations, never provide the attention and reaction they're seeking. This feels harsh. It feels like you're being cruel. That feeling is your conscience speaking, which is exactly the capacity they lack and will exploit if you listen to it when dealing with them. They all violate reciprocity. They all lack genuine empathy. They all view relationships as transactions. Here's what unites the Dark Triad despite their differences. They fundamentally don't see other humans as humans. The narcissist sees mirrors. The Machiavellian sees chess pieces. The psychopath sees objects. This is the core insight that changes everything. Once you understand that someone is operating from this framework, their behavior stops being confusing, stops being hurtful in a personal sense, starts being predictable and manageable. They're not choosing to harm you. They're not even thinking in terms of harm. They're pursuing their goal and you're in the way, or you're useful for their goal and they're using you. The emotional content you're experiencing, the betrayal, the confusion, the pain, isn't part of their calculation at all. Machiavelli understood this when he wrote that a prince cannot be bound by morality that subjects obey. The Dark Triad operates in the same space. They're playing a different game with different rules, and your mistake is assuming they're playing your game. They don't target everyone equally. They choose specific victims. You were selected for a reason. This is crucial to understand. The Dark Triad succeeds because they're efficient predators. They don't waste time on people who are too difficult to manipulate. They scan for specific markers: high empathy, you feel obligated to help; strong need for approval, you'll work for validation; poor boundaries, you won't push back; recent trauma, you're vulnerable; isolation, no one will notice; resources they want: money, status, connections, supply; If you've been targeted, examine what they identified. What made you appear accessible? What boundary did they test first? The narcissist tested whether you'd accept boundary violations for approval. The Machiavellian tested whether you'd share information and accept ambiguous obligations. The psychopath tested whether you'd ignore red flags and accept their frame of reality. And when you passed their test, when you demonstrated the vulnerability they sought, they committed to the extraction process. They thrive in specific structures. Corporate hierarchies attract Machiavellians. Celebrity culture breeds narcissists. High-stakes industries enable psychopaths. The Dark Triad doesn't emerge in a vacuum. Certain environments actively reward these traits. A corporate structure that values results over methods selects for Machiavellian behavior. An industry built on attention and image cultivates narcissism. A high-risk, high-reward field attracts psychopathic risk-seeking. This means if you're operating in these environments, you're statistically likely to encounter these patterns at higher rates than the general population. Machiavelli wrote The Prince for Political Environments. Those same principles apply wherever power is contested, which is everywhere humans gather in hierarchies. The Dark Triad hasn't increased in prevalence. We've simply built more systems that reward their approach, more platforms that amplify their tactics, more structures where their lack of emotional governor becomes a competitive advantage rather than a social handicap. Define what you will and won't tolerate, enforce consequences immediately, never negotiate foundational principles. Most people's boundaries are vague wishes they apologize for having. I'd prefer if you didn't. It makes me uncomfortable when I wish you would. These aren't boundaries, these are suggestions. The Dark Triad operates on a simple principle. Push until you hit resistance. If there's no resistance, keep pushing. Your boundary must be a wall, not a request for consideration. Here's the structure. State the boundary clearly once. When violated, implement the consequence immediately, without discussion. Never defend the boundary or justify it. That invites negotiation. Machiavelli wrote that princes must be feared if they cannot be loved, because fear is more reliable. You don't need to be feared, but you need to be costly. The Dark Triad predator operates on cost-benefit analysis. Make the cost of manipulating you exceed the benefit. How? By having boundaries that impose immediate, real consequences when crossed. Control what you share, with whom you share it, when you share it. Every piece of personal information you release is ammunition that can be used strategically. This doesn't mean being paranoid or closed off. It means being intentional. The narcissist will weaponize your insecurities. The Machiavellian will use your connections and weaknesses for leverage. The psychopath will find the exact vulnerability that gives them access. Don't hand them the weapons. Develop concentric circles of trust. Surface information for outer circles. Vulnerable information only for proven inner circle. Never for new relationships, no matter how intense the connection feels. Because love bombing, charm offensives, and strategic friendship building all operate on accelerated intimacy, pushing you to trust before trust is earned, to share before safety is established. Don't isolate yourself. Maintain independent relationships. Verify information through multiple sources. The Dark Triad's power multiplies in isolation. They prefer victims who are cut off from outside perspective, who have no one to reality check their experience, who depend entirely on the manipulator's version of events. The counter is simple but requires conscious effort. Maintain relationships that aren't mediated by the potential manipulator. Cultivate friendships with people who will tell you hard truths. Stay connected to people who knew you before this relationship. When someone tries to isolate you, resist. When they badmouth everyone else in your life, investigate. When they create dependency, build independence. Machiavelli advised princes to have multiple counselors who couldn't coordinate with each other. You need multiple trusted sources who can provide independent perspective. This doesn't mean living by committee approval. It means having a reality check system that prevents you from being entirely captured by one person's narrative. Not every battle deserves your energy. Not every manipulation requires confrontation. Sometimes winning means walking away. This is perhaps the hardest lesson. You don't have to win every encounter. The Dark Triad thrives on engagement. They want your emotional reaction. They feed on drama, conflict, and attention. The narcissist wants you fighting for their approval. The Machiavellian wants you invested in their game. The psychopath wants you destabilized and reactive. All of these desires require your participation. Strategic detachment means recognizing manipulation, choosing not to engage, letting them win battles while you win the war. The war is your peace, your resources, your psychological territory. If maintaining that means letting someone think they fooled you, letting them believe they're superior, letting them have the last word while you simply exit the situation, that's not weakness, that's strategy. Machiavelli wrote extensively about appearing weaker than you are, about letting enemies underestimate you, about choosing which conflicts matter. Keep a log. Track their predictions versus reality. Notice the gap between words and actions. The Dark Triad succeeds through pattern disruption. They keep you off balance, reacting to each incident in isolation, never seeing the overall design. The counter is pattern recognition. When you track behavior over time, the manipulation becomes visible. The narcissist's cycle of idealization and devaluation appears. The Machiavellian's network of obligations reveals itself. The psychopath's trail of destruction and contradictions compounds. Write down what they said they'd do. Note what they actually did. Record how they explain the discrepancy. This serves two purposes. First, it prevents gaslighting. You have evidence that contradicts their revision of history. Second, it makes the pattern undeniable to yourself. You can't unsee it once it's documented. The scattered incidents become a clear strategy. And once you see the strategy, their power over you collapses because you're no longer reacting to individual events. You're responding to a known pattern with prepared countermeasures. Stop expecting fairness. Stop appealing to empathy they don't have. Start thinking in terms of leverage. The fundamental transformation is this. You must stop operating from the assumption that everyone plays by the same moral rules. They don't. The Dark Triad doesn't feel bound by reciprocity, fairness, or compassion. These aren't values to them. These are weaknesses to exploit in others. Once you accept this, truly accept it without the comfortable denial that tells you surely they'll understand if I just explain clearly enough, you become dangerous to them. Not dangerous in the sense of threatening them, dangerous in the sense of being unprofitable to target. You stop providing the reactions they seek. You stop having the vulnerabilities they exploit. You start operating with the same level of strategic clarity Machiavelli recommended for navigating political environments. Assume self-interest, verify everything, trust through testing rather than trusting through hoping. Maintain options, never become completely dependent on anyone. Your value doesn't depend on their validation. Your reality doesn't require their confirmation. Your worth exists independent of their assessment. The narcissist's greatest weapon is making you doubt yourself. The Machiavellian's greatest weapon is making you doubt your perceptions. The psychopath's greatest weapon is making you doubt reality itself. All three weapons require the same vulnerability. You must be uncertain of your own internal compass. The transformation comes when you reclaim that compass. This doesn't mean arrogance. It doesn't mean refusing feedback. It means having a core sense of self that doesn't collapse when challenged. When the narcissist withdraws approval, you notice it but don't chase it. When the Machiavellian tries to reframe history, you trust your memory. When the psychopath denies obvious facts, you hold your reality without needing them to confirm it. This is emotional sovereignty. You remain the ultimate authority on your own experience. They're playing a short game. You're playing a long game. Time reveals all patterns. The Dark Triad often wins initial encounters because they're willing to do things immediately that others won't do at all. They'll lie without hesitation. They'll betray without guilt. They'll exploit without second thought. This creates early advantages, but these advantages are unstable because they're built on manipulation rather than genuine foundation. Time works against them. Their patterns become visible. Their trail of destruction accumulates. Their masks slip. Your advantage is patience. You don't need to defeat them today. You need to outlast them while maintaining your integrity. Machiavelli understood that some victories require time. He wrote about waiting for the right moment, about letting enemies destroy themselves, about the strategic value of patience combined with preparation. The Dark Triad is often impatient. The narcissist needs constant supply. The Machiavellian overextends their network. The psychopath takes escalating risks. Time exposes all of these tendencies. You don't have to become like them. You don't have to close off completely. You have to become strategic about trust. There's a tempting response to Dark Triad trauma. Become hard, closed, suspicious of everyone. This is unnecessary and counterproductive. The goal isn't to eliminate trust. It's to make trust earned rather than assumed. The goal isn't to eliminate vulnerability. It's to reserve vulnerability for people who've demonstrated they'll honor it. Think of vulnerability as a privilege, not a right. New people get surface access. Deeper access comes with demonstrated trustworthiness. How do you test for trustworthiness? Through small risks. You share something minor and see what happens. You set a small boundary and see if it's respected. You ask for something small and see if they follow through. You watch how they treat others when there's no benefit to them. These tests don't guarantee perfect judgment, but they dramatically reduce the likelihood of catastrophic misjudgment. They're not all powerful. They're not uniquely intelligent. They're simply willing to violate rules you honor. This is the liberation, realizing that the Dark Triad's success comes not from superior capability, but from absence of constraint. They're not playing chess at a higher level. They're playing chess while you're following additional rules they've discarded. The moment you recognize this, their mystique dissolves. The narcissist is just desperate and fragile. The Machiavellian is just calculating and hollow. The psychopath is just empty and parasitic. None of these are marks of superiority. They're adaptations to emptiness. And adaptation is not the same as strength. Machiavelli wrote that fortune favors the bold, but he also wrote that those who depend on fortune alone are ruined when fortune changes. The Dark Triad depends entirely on finding vulnerable targets in favorable circumstances. Remove either element, make yourself invulnerable or change the circumstances, and their power evaporates. When you leave, leave completely. No explanation owed, no closure required, no final confrontation that feeds their need for drama. The cleanest ending is the one that gives them nothing. No emotional reaction to feed on, no argument to win, no attention to harvest, no final scene where they can play victim or villain. You simply make the decision, implement the decision, and maintain the decision regardless of their attempts to re-engage. This is harder than it sounds because humans are wired for closure, for explanation, for resolution. The Dark Triad counts on this wiring. They know you'll want to explain yourself. They're prepared to use that moment against you. Machiavelli advised against revealing your plans before executing them. When you're leaving a Dark Triad relationship, reveal nothing, explain nothing, justify nothing. Make your preparations quietly. Secure your resources. Establish your boundaries. Then implement complete severance. They'll attempt to hoover you back with charm, with crisis, with threats, with promises of change. These are all tactics. The only counter that works is persistent, complete distance. Now you know what to look for. You'll spot it earlier next time. You'll extract yourself before deep damage occurs. The true value of this knowledge isn't just escaping current manipulation, it's preventing future manipulation. You've developed pattern recognition. You know the early warning signs. The narcissist's love bombing will feel too intense too quickly. The Machiavellian's helpful favors will feel slightly obligating. The psychopath's charm will feel rehearsed. You'll notice these things in early interactions rather than after months of investment. This doesn't mean becoming suspicious of everyone. It means trusting your instincts when something feels off. It means slowing down when someone is trying to accelerate intimacy. Most importantly, it means valuing your peace enough to protect it, to say no to relationships that have red flags, to exit situations that feel exploitative, to prioritize your psychological safety over the discomfort of potentially misjudging someone. They need victims. You are no longer one. This is asymmetric warfare, and you've changed the battlefield. Here's the final truth that changes everything. The Dark Triad's entire strategy depends on finding people who don't understand the game being played. They need targets who assume good faith. They need victims who honor rules the predator has discarded. They need people who will doubt themselves rather than doubt the manipulator. The moment you understand their playbook, you cease to be a viable target. Not because you become stronger, not because you become smarter, but because you become educated. And education is the only immunity that matters. The ability to see manipulation in real time, to recognize the pattern before it completes, to understand that someone's anger at your boundaries is proof the boundaries were necessary, to know that being called paranoid or cold or difficult by someone who wants to exploit you is actually confirmation you're protecting yourself correctly. You've reached the end of this. You know what you know now. The question is, what will you do with it? The Dark Triad operates in shadows, in the space between what people say and what they do, in the gap between the person they present and the person they are. You've been given light, not metaphorical light, practical, specific light. You know the patterns, you know the tells, you know the countermoves. This knowledge is a kind of power Machiavelli would recognize. The power of seeing clearly what others see through comfortable delusion. But knowledge alone changes nothing. Knowledge without application is entertainment. You must actually implement the protocols. You must actually enforce the boundaries. You must actually distance yourself from people who demonstrate these patterns. No matter how much you wish they were different, no matter how much potential you see in them, no matter how much you've invested in the relationship. The sunk cost fallacy is the Dark Triad's best friend. They count on you staying because of what you've already given, rather than leaving because of what you'll continue to lose. Machiavelli wrote The Prince as a guide for navigating power. This is your guide for navigating predators. The difference between the two is that Machiavelli's prince wanted power. You just want peace. Peace to build, to love, to trust selectively and wisely, to give your energy to people who will honor it rather than exploit it, to live without constantly defending your reality against those who would rather rewrite it for their benefit. That peace is available, not through defeating the Dark Triad, not through changing them or exposing them or winning arguments with them, through becoming someone they can't afford to target, too expensive, too aware, too boundaried, too willing to walk away from anyone who violates your fundamental dignity. This is the transformation, not from victim to victor, but from victim to strategist. From someone who plays the game unknowingly to someone who sees the game, understands the game, and chooses not to play. You can't eliminate the Dark Triad from the world, but you can eliminate your availability to them. That's not cynicism, that's sovereignty. And sovereignty over your own life, your own choices, your own boundaries, your own energy is the only power that actually matters in the end. The Dark Triad will find other targets. They always do. Your job is to ensure that target is no longer you. The choice is yours. The knowledge is given. The action is waiting.